Welcome to 340 Caribbean Culture Home Edition. All the things you see made here is for use at home, consumption at home, really. And today I'm going to make my son's birthday cake, and he's decided that he wants to follow in my typical birthday cake flavor, which is a black Swiss chocolate. So follow me along while we make this cake for my son's 21st. Starting to feel a little old. Okay. Any recipes you get from us, it's up to you to make it your own. Now, I'm going to give you some measurements, but you work it until your ancestors speak to you, because I tend to work it until my ancestors speak to me. So let's start. And I know there are going to be many bakers out there that's going to tell me what they do or what's the right thing to do. As in life, I'm going to do what's right for me. So if there are those comments coming, you could keep them to yourself. We're going to start with, we're doing a 3-layer cake. So we're going to start with 4 eggs. And I tend to cream my eggs and my butter and my sugar together at once. Okay, so I never put the sugar in there first, because it ends up just sticking to the bowl when you add something moist like the eggs or the butter. So I put that in last. And this is a 1/2 cup measure. I take a full cup of butter and I add that to what I'm going to cream. So that's a 1/2 cup. We're going with a second one. And we like nice, fluffy, thick layers in our cakes. So for some of you, this maybe will make 2 3-layer cakes, but this is what I like to do.
Behind the mixer.
Okay, 1.5 cups of sugar. And no, I'm not going to go ahead and filter it. It's all going to come out in the wash, so to speak, once I cream.
And cream and sugar, what does that mean?
So basically, I like to use granulated sugar. When baking, but it ends up crystallizing on the top of your cake. So creaming it allows it to disintegrate so that it'll mix well into the flour, and you don't have that firmer, hard top shell that you do when you don't cream your sugar and butter together. So we're going to do that for about maybe 2 minutes on a low to medium mix. And I like to go ahead and add my vanilla essence while it's doing that. And I use like 2 teaspoons. And then I add a little almond. This is this is emulsion, and what it does is that a lot of times the flavor of the vanilla essence or the almond essence bakes away, and so the effect isn't as long lasting. But with an emulsion, that flavor stays in there. And I just use like half a teaspoon. And the idea is to use it the way I would almond essence, but because it's so potent, I don't need as much. So let's go ahead and scrape the sides, something you're going to do continuously while baking. And that's just to make sure that all the ingredients that you have put in is melding well together. We want them all to be mixed well together. Put it back for another 30 seconds or so, just to make sure, like I said, that everything mixes well together. It is not the most attractive part of baking, but trust me, it's very necessary. While we're waiting for that, because we're going to add all our wet ingredients in together, and that is my base. The next thing that I'm going to do is add my melted milk chocolate. And I get 2 to 3 ounces of chocolate chips, add about 2 ounces of milk to it, and I put it in the microwave for about 30 seconds just to make sure it doesn't burn, because we want this completely melted. Okay. And it's great to go back in and just make sure there's no sugar. You tend to feel the little granules of sugar if it's not properly mixed. And it's okay, just don't put it on high, but it's okay to do another 15 seconds. So it's okay to take it another 15 seconds or so and just make sure that is properly done. I do it on a low. In the meantime, while that's being done, I like to use a chopstick just because I get better results with it. I could not tell you why, it's just the reality for me. But I like to mix my milk and chocolate together.
Can they use like a heavy cream?
They absolutely can use a heavy cream, but remember, baking is about a balance of sugars and fats. So that would make a difference in how much sugar that you put in, because heavy cream is high in fat. But it does make it a lot smoother when you melt it. Okay. And what we're getting down to is a very smooth melted chocolate. Remember, always grab your scrape your sides. Okay. And yes, it is a little bit warm, but we do want it to be warm because it keeps its liquid form. If it cools, it starts to get hard. So there we go. And we're going to add this to our creamed mixture. Now, and we mix this in on low. The next things that we're going to add, we've got our coffee, our black cocoa, but I have two secret weapons in making a moist cake. So if it was just your basic single layer cake, I would use maybe 1 tablespoon. But what I have here is 3 tablespoons of mayo. Yep, regular old mayo. And because mayo has eggs, oils, different things in there, a little bit of salt, they're all things that we use in here, but it gives it the nice little bump to keep it nice and moist. I'm going to scrape that out. Yes, I use the same spatula that I use to scrape out the butter out of the container. Yes, they're all the same thing. There's nothing going back anywhere, so there's no cross contamination. And back to mixing.
When she said cross contamination, it means double dipping for who doesn't know.
Now, this is, as you can see, it's a lot finer. This is our black chocolate, our Swiss black chocolate. I love this thing. It makes it so nice and smooth. And this is some espresso. Espresso brings out the chocolate. And when you make this cake, yes, I put 1.5 cups of sugar in there, but you're not going to taste a sweet cake. And but you're going to taste a flavorful cake. And that's what we're about here at 340 Caribbean Culture, is the flavor. So the espresso brings out the chocolate flavor, and I absolutely love it. Now we're going to go ahead and add both the chocolate and the espresso to the mix. And this is roughly 1/2 cup of chocolate. Okay. And I add them both at the same time. Now keep in mind that you can brew this and pour it in as a liquid, but I like to put it in as a powder because I prefer using whole milk as my liquid because it makes everything fluffier and fuller. So I use it as the grounds. I give this a little bit heavier mix, full medium, because I don't want that powder to sit on top of our mixture. So I'll put it on medium, let it mix for about 30 seconds, and then I'll go back in and I'll scrape the sides, because we're always scraping the sides when we're baking. And I'll let you see what the color looks like. I'm going to pop this out so that I can scrape the sides without any hindrance. And as you can see the sides, as the liquid is getting in contact with that Swiss chocolate, how it looks black, despite the grounds looking brown when we first took a look at it a few minutes ago. I like to use the whisk to scrape off any remaining residue on my spatula. Do you? This may not be for you, but do you? Baking, I know it's a science, but there's still room for you to make it yours. And it's so important to go ahead and do that. Whether you're baking for someone or you're baking just at home for the fun of it, I don't care the recipe, make it yours, okay? So we're just gonna let that mix for a little bit. It's gonna take roughly about 2 minutes. And when you come in again, you'll be able to see that it's mixing and it's so dark, but it doesn't have that bitter dark chocolate taste. Okay, now it's been 2 minutes and this is all mixed in. Come on over, take a look and see what it looks like compared to before. Okay, it's so nice and rich and dark, but it's rich in look, not in flavor. It gives you that perfect balance right before it's too rich. So now, yes, oil and butter have similar functions, but in baking, oil is moisture, butter is flavor. And because that butter brings flavor, yes, we have enough butter in there, but I like to use a little artificial butter flavor because that just gives it a little extra kick. If you want to use the real thing, do you, but just this in here, it's very simple, just about a teaspoon and a half, until your ancestors said that they had enough.
And what's that?
And this is just butter flavor.
Okay. So I have some kind of baking experience, but I'm not what you consider a pro.
Mm-hmm.
The average person would just toss the stuff in the mixer and just let it go.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's common sense of why you scrape it down, but just to elaborate a little bit for those that don't know and won't understand, like the average person would throw it in and just call it a day.
Well, the order, like, okay, so if I'm making a cake and it's a box cake, it don't even matter if I put that butter or oil first or whatever. But when you're baking from scratch, it makes a difference because the order in which you put things in, I like to put my wet ingredients in one bowl, my dry ingredients in another bowl. But it makes a difference in how your cake is going to come out. And when we bake this cake, I'm going to cut one of them just so that you guys can see the reason why we put the wet ingredients in a particular order and then the dry ingredients. So yes, we put the butter flavor in there, but now we're going to add the oil because we have multiple things that keep this moist factor up where it is. And the first one, of course, is the butter. We're going to get good flavor with the butter, but we're also going to put some oil in there. And this is 1.5 cups of oil because that's what my ancestors said.
Is there any particular oil?
I prefer vegetable oil. That works for me. If you want to use corn oil, by all means, you can use corn oil if that works for you. But just any typical oil that you would typically use to, say, fry some chicken. Hint.
But I'm gonna give you a story. When my brother and I, when we was real young, I'm talking about elementary school young, the first time we baked a cake, you could actually fry chicken with the cake. The cake was so oily, it was just straight up crazy. But we took a napkin and soaked it up. We didn't know no better. We ate the cake, but it was extremely oily.
Yes, there is such a thing in baking as too much, and oil you have to balance. So I put 1.5 cups of oil in here because I'm making what would be, in your opinion, 2 cakes, and you'll see why. Yes, typically I bake and I sell stuff, but we're baking for home. The gloves ain't on, but you'll see why we like our cakes the way they are. It's just because it's fun and it's cake. Who wants just one itty bitty bit of cake? You are not enjoying life, are you? So I turned it up a little bit because I want a little bit more intensity because I want everything to mix perfectly. We have a few different textures of things like the coffee grounds. and the chocolate is much smoother than the coffee grounds, but then we have butter and we have sugar in there. So the consistency to get them mixed well, I just take up the intensity a little bit. Okay, so I've turned it off. And if you come up now, you'll see a nice, dark, smooth liquid portion. Okay, now I'm going to start adding some of my powder. If you notice so far, I've spoken about using whole milk, and I haven't put that in as yet. And there's a reason, there's a process behind that. So what I am going to add is my baking powder, and I use a teaspoon, but I can't seem to find what I did with my measuring spoon. So I'm going to steal my nephew's spoon and put 1 teaspoon in there, like 1.5 teaspoons. Okay. And if you don't know, baking powder is what we use to make sure that your cakes rise. I'm going to just mix that nice and smooth in there. And then we're going to do what? Scrape the sides. Scraping the sides is important because you could lose so much of your ingredients that stayed on the side. And then when it comes time to pour that batter into the cake pans, you're going to have an unevenly mixed batter. Okay. Okay. Now I'm going to add the milk and the dry ingredients, which would be a pinch or 2 of salt and our flour. So start with the milk. The milk will change the color of your batter so far, but it is okay. And I put a 1/2 cup to 3/4 cup of milk into the mixture. And I use the whole milk. And just know that using that milk, it's going to change the color, but not by very much. It's just going to look like a dark chocolate instead of a black chocolate, but we'll remedy that on the end. Okay. And that pinch of salt. If you're a Gen Xer, at some point or another, we all had the umbrella, the girl in the rain with the umbrella salt or Morton's. And it's just a little pinch of salt. And go back to mixing. Just want to make sure everything is evenly mixed. So yes, I do start and stop my mixer often, but it's necessary to make sure everything is evenly mixed. Okay. And then we're going to put 2 cups of flour in your mixer. Okay, so I'm sorry. I added my flour and I added a pack of hot chocolate. So you have the dark chocolate powder, the melted milk chocolate chips, and some hot chocolate in there. Okay, so I started mixing, I added my flour and I started mixing it together, and it's going to take a little time. Put it on medium, but I like to add just a 1/2 teaspoon or 2 of my white chocolate powder. And I can add that as it's going in.
Can I see what that looks
Yes.
like on the inside?
Oh, absolutely. It's just white chocolate powder.
Okay. Okay, I'm ready to eat some of that.
Okay, so we've mixed everything in, and we're coming up to the very last three things that I'm going to put in here. So remember, I told you once you put in the flour and stuff, your mix is going to get lighter. So what I do is that I go ahead and I add another couple tablespoons of my black Swiss chocolate powder.
And that helps keep it a rich color, huh?
Yeah, but it also keeps the flavor.
Like we Caribbean people say, it keep it from washing out.
Okay. I love our culture. It's the only culture where the same word could mean a plethora of things, all contradicting each other. Take the word fresh, right? While we're waiting for this to do its thing, take the word fresh. Fresh could mean that you just recently made something, it's fresh. It could also mean that that chicken tastes fresh, unseasoned or not good. You tell your child you're being fresh, you're being disrespectful. You tell somebody you're going to take a fresh, you're going to wash your backside. I love our people. Now, if you come and take a look, you'll see that it has gotten darker. And the beauty of this is the longer it sits, the darker it gets. Now, we call it a black Swiss chocolate cake. So I add just about 5 or 6 drops of black food coloring, nothing too much that's going to alter the taste. So there we go. But it's just enough to give it, it's not going to alter the taste, and it doesn't lend very much to the color because it's so much versus what we've just put in there. But it's just about giving that tint. I like it. If you don't like it, you don't have to add it in, but I like it. Okay. At this point in time, if you feel, because you need a thicker batter, but we don't want the cake to be dry. So here's our secret recipe, our secret additive, and it is just for this cake chocolate jello instant pudding mix. And I put 2 scoops of that in here. Now, if you've put in flour and it looks like it's a little too thick for you, by all means, go ahead and add a little bit more milk.
And that's approximately a quarter cup.
Of
Like the powder you just put in.
Oh no, it's just about 4 teaspoons, maybe 2 tablespoons. Okay, it's not even the whole package that the jello mix comes in. Okay, so if you come on over and take a look before I scrape the sides, you see why I always tell you to scrape the sides. You see all that light color powder mix? That's my hot chocolate mix. And it just stayed on the side.
You need it in the cake, not on the side.
That's right.
I'm not ordering a side of fries.
So we're just gonna mix that up a little bit. For me, the consistency seems a little bit on the thicker side, so I'll just add like maybe 2 or 3 ounces of milk to it, just because I want a moist cake, and chocolate is so easy to be dry. Okay, and let's let it do what it do for a little while more, and then I'm gonna go grease these pans. And yes, all the great bakers out there will tell you to mix a little flour with lard and you have a nice pan grease and so forth. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go ahead, take my pans. I'm going to spray a little Baker's Joy in there, send my brush around there to make sure all the crevices and the corners got done. See you back in a few minutes. Okay, so we're back. I let that mix for a little bit. Went to get me some water because the throat dry, but come on over, take a look, see what it looks like and how dark it looks. Okay? And we're going to just let that sit and breathe for a little bit. Remember, I tell you, the longer it sits, the darker it looks. So we're going to let that sit and breathe. In the meantime, I have, what's the word? I have reappropriated. I was going to say I stole, but I have reappropriated my husband's barbecue brush. Ta-da! I love this thing, and he has since let me get it. He's never even used it, but I had better use for it. And if there's a use, we should put it there, right? Put it together. So now I'm going to tell you guys something, and some of you are going to be like, duh. Some of you are going to be like, that makes sense. If you use Baker's Joy, right? It's a combination of something to grease the pan, but also it has a little flour in there so that you have that grease and flour on your pan in one simple spray. You do not turn the can to angle into the pan. You're going to turn the pan and work the can that way, okay? So, because when you do this, when you bend it that way, all of the aerosol will come out, but you'll still have product in the can and there's no way to get it out. So, my husband will tell you, I don't like losing my money on anything that I've bought. So it took me one time to realize what I'd done wrong. And it hurt my heart to get rid of that product, but there was no way for me to get it out. So I just brush around the sides and in the bottom, but I like to make sure that little corner gets a good bit of it in there, just so that our cake, once we turn it over, we don't have pieces of cake stuck in the crevice of the pan. So here we go. I hit the corners first and last.
You know, things have changed so much because I've worked in the bakery at Grand Palazzo. Just step in to help a little something. They didn't really teach you a whole lot, but back in the day, was there no spraying of nothing.
Okay, so we're Gen Xers, right? Hand mix. Okay, we're Gen Xers, but we're poor Gen Xers. So my mom's, her automatic mixer was her kids. She'll mix and mix and mix. And I love my sister because my sister took like a lot of the recipes that my mom did for our local culture, and she makes them so it get tart. My pineapple tart. Anyway, go over there, see her Gem Sweets and Eats on Instagram. And she does the coconut cakes and the carrot cake and so forth, like from home. And yeah, we grated the carrots. We greased the pan with Crisco and then put a little flour on there and beat it around. Now we don't even have to do that because now we have a spray that'll do that for us. But yeah, just make sure that corner is properly greased. Your bottom is properly greased. We don't want cakes falling out of the pan while the other half stays in there. Okay? Now, I'm just going to take this off so that I can remove the bowl. And I'm going to set the bowl aside. I'm going to set the bowl aside with a cover on it just to let it sit for about 10 or 15 minutes. The sole purpose, again, is to let that mix sit so that it can darken. In the meantime, About 5 minutes before I'm ready to take that off, I'm gonna set my oven, I'm sorry. Baking is about patience. So I'm gonna set my oven to 310. For those of you that want to speed it up a little bit, 320. But I'm gonna let it preheat, of course, and then I'm gonna put my cakes in there, and they're gonna be in there for about 45 minutes to an hour. And then you get to see me decorate the cakes. Okay, so now it's time to whip off the surprise, right? And you take a look, see how nice and dark it is in there. Okay. And we're gonna go ahead and pour these in the pan that we greased and set aside. Oven is still preheating, but it's absolutely okay to start my pour on the pans. Now, I'm gonna pour up to half the pan and give the room for it to rise. Okay. I am a staunch proponent of tasting your batter. Yes, we get the warnings about raw eggs and consuming them. But how are you going to know what your cake is going to taste like if you don't just take a little dab of said batter? You're making the cake for other people to consume. If it's not something that you would eat, it's not something you would consume, then by all means, don't expect other people to consume it.
No, I would have thought. Now I'm just saying, asking questions for people. Okay, I know better, but I'm just asking. So there's no such thing as there is, but people say there's no such thing as a dumb question.
If you genuinely don't know.
Why is it not full?
The pan?
Yeah.
Because we have to give it space to rise. You know, we put the baking powder in there. We expect it to rise. I don't want a flat cake. I like my cake to rise.
Now, for the average person that would think you go ahead and put in at least half the pan. Mm-hmm. But it's not really half.
It's not half because I don't want it to get that round top. I want it to be a nice flat top or as close to it as possible. Now, we're not knocking anybody to get a rise because you just take that, crumble it up, and make you some cake pops. There's no trash in baking if you do it right. But we can minimize that waste if that's not our intention by doing it this way and letting it rise slowly so it can rise evenly. So that's why we bake on such a low temperature. We want the even distribution of heat to cook the cakes evenly so that we don't have that round dome top. Now that dome top, that'd be the best part of the cake. But I'm not consuming this cake myself. It's my son included. So we're gonna do it the way I would do it if we were selling it, the cake.
And you said you have it at 310 degrees.
Yes, 310 in order for the even distribution. We just got the beep a little bit ago that the preheat was ready. So we're going to go ahead and put this in.
Okay, and why is it that I think the normal packages will tell you what, 350? Mm-hmm. Why are you going low and slow?
Absolutely. Even if I was baking from a box cake, mm-hmm. I would bake it slow, and because again, I wanted to evenly distribute that heat for the cakes to rise evenly.
Even when I did the upside down cake and stuff, mm-hmm. I went to I did it like 335 or so. You know, to each his own. Everybody does things their way. And the low and slow it works for barbecue. I guess it works for everything else.
It can, but you know why yours can take that 325, 335, even 350 is because you're cooking in a cast iron. Cast iron automatically evenly distribute that heat. We're not. We're using an aluminum cake pan, you know? So now I have to do some cupcakes for the baby, you know, but that's off to the side. That's why I have the extra batter, because my Zion, every time I bake, it's something or another for him. So yeah. But now we're going to leave these to cook. We're going to get Alexa 40-minute timer. And even though it'll be in there 45 to 55, maybe even an hour, I come in at the 40-minute timer and I take a little toothpick. I want a little bit of the crumbs to come out on the toothpick because that's telling me that the moisture is retained. And then I'll take it out, and keep in mind that you don't take it out of the pan immediately. So it'll sit in the pan for a little bit while it cools. It'll still cook a little bit, but it won't dry. And so that's why we set the timer for 40 minutes in. Okay.
I'm learning along with you guys.
All right. Well, see you in 40 minutes while we take these cakes out. Okay. So we've taken them out, let them cool. And I'm sorry that I didn't record that. But when I took them out, when I did the original test, there were little crumbles on there. You see that there's a little at the edge. And they're now cool. So that's what we want. We want to make sure that our cakes are moist. Now they all came from the same batch. We don't have to check each individual one, but you'll get the same results. So I washed my hands. Always wash your hands. And I'm just going to take and turn this one over on a cake board right out of the pan. There we go. See, very little, if any, is left inside. Now I'm going to let this sit face down because, as you can see, the entire thing doesn't sit completely down. So we want to make sure that it gets an even sit. So I'm just going to sit it down this way, okay? But as you can see, we don't have that rise in the middle. It's just evenly baked. Okay. Now, for anybody who's ever done a little bit of cake decorating, sometimes you know that sometimes our cakes, you know, we notice that our cakes are a little bit uneven. There's nothing wrong with going in and even it out by taking off the top.
AKA snack.
My family love these. Like I always say, there's nothing better than the top of that cake. It's delicious. So I'm just going to slide that off.
I'm going to just be honest. She keeps a container of cake tops just for Prince Zion.
Well,
the rest of us just got to help.
And we just even it out. And as you can see, this cake is moist, nice and moist. It's not oily, it's not dry, it's moist. Okay? So from there, I'm gonna go and let all of the heat come out of it. Typically, I would put it in the fridge, but my son's birthday is tomorrow, so I'm gonna bake and decorate on the same day. So I'm gonna decorate these, but I'm gonna just let it sit for a while so that the entire heat can come out. There's lukewarm heat coming from here, and I don't want the icing to melt.
It's another close up.
And the reason why I cut off the top of this one is that I wanted y'all to see that this cake is moist. Okay? So, any questions, you feel free to reach out to me, but as you can see, it's a dark, almost black cake. And if you want it darker than this, because the idea of a black cake is delicious, by all means, you can squeeze like about a tablespoon or a teaspoon of black food coloring in there. But this is as dark as it's gonna get considering we use the Swiss black cocoa. It's just so delicious. I'm telling you, I love this cake. Okay, so we're back. The cakes are all cooled, and I've got my cake board, my spatula, varying sizes of offset spatulas, my scraper 1, scraper 2, and this time around, listen, I am not in the mood to make icing from scratch, but my son is so easy to deal with. He goes, Mom, it's just as good as the Wilton. So I just went out, bought a Wilton, and mixed in some black cocoa powder and drop a couple drops of black icing in there. And when you do that, it's going to look gray. Then it's going to look charcoal gray. It's going to start a charcoal gray. Then it's going to look steel gray. And then it's going to look like, a little bit darker and a little bit darker. And the longer that the air gets to it, the darker it's going to look. So don't worry if you do this and it looks light to begin with. The longer the exposure to the mixture and the air, it's going to get darker. So the first thing that we do, we take one of the spatulas. Now, I wash my hands. Always wash your hands. And I'm going to put a dab, just literally a dab in the middle. And the idea is to hold the cake in place so that you can go ahead and ice the cake. Okay? And that first cake that we laid out, that was face down, that's what I'm going to use. And as we can see, it's flat all the way around. But if I needed to cut the top, this would be the point in which I would grab it and do it. But this time around, I'm not. And I'm using less icing between the layers than I usually do because he prefers the flavor of the cake more so than the icing. So we're going to do a thin coat between the layers. And it doesn't have to be neat because, again, these are the layers here. And anything that's hanging over the side of the cake will eventually go to the outside of the cake. So I'm going to make it really easy. You don't have to be a professional. I never went to school for this. A few things caught my eye. The community is absolutely amazing. Most people share things. Other people teach classes, and you feel free to go to the class that piques your interest. So typically I would have double the amount of icing that's you're seeing here. But like I say, his preference is the flavor of the cake more so than the cake. The flavor of the cake more so than the cake icing. You see, so we see that there's some outside, and that's, like I said, that's absolutely fine.
When you get a chance, can I get a close-up of the bucket?
Oh, sure.
On the inside of the bucket?
Oh, sure.
I mean, we can see it, but...
That's not a problem. I like to get all my icing. If I paid for the ingredients or I paid for the bucket, by all means, I want to get all that I can.
Okay.
Okay. And because I put that little bit of icing down there as I'm rotating the cake stand, I don't have to worry about the cake slipping. Okay, but short motions around is what we're going to utilize, especially on top. But again, this is only half the amount that I would typically put between layers. Some people might say this is a lot, but really and truly it isn't. And I take pride in the fact that you never get an abundantly sweet cake from me. And most of the sweet that you would get would come from the icing. But if you're a person that's like, I don't want the icing, it's too sweet, you can go ahead, remove that, and you're going to get a delicious cake full of flavor. Because flavor is what we like here. Okay, now here's the thing that we do, that last layer. Now I just cut the top of this one off because I wanted you guys to see how moist it was. But that last layer, we're going to turn it upside down because the bottom is always even, right? Even if you cut the cake, if you cut it a little too much one way, it can be a little bit lopsided, but the bottom of the cake is always even because it has the support of the cake pan, right? So we go ahead and we put that on there, and this is my favorite part, believe it or not. Okay, most of it is my favorite part, decorating the cake. But I like to dump a nice big chunk on top. And make my short little strokes left and right while rotating the cake. Yes, I'm going to tell you, yes, this is going to go over the side. Expect that. Okay? See, it's going over the side. And typically I would do a crumb coat, but this time around I'm not. The cake isn't crumbly, so I'm not worried about it getting in the icing. Now, I didn't do it this time, but you get the best results if you let your cake sit in the fridge for a little bit because it's firmer. And I know some of you can see me, you can see the cake when I press on it and the release. And that's just part of why we put the ingredients in the order that we do, because that plays into allowing certain activations to happen with certain ingredients, like the baking powder and so forth. And sometimes I feel like a construction worker because icing the cake in the beginning is like using spackle. You're going to have some places where the cake shows up under the icing and you just got to go in with a little patch here and there until you get it even, and then you start using the scrapers to make the cake even, the icing even on the cake. So this is his adult cake. He's 21 and he's gonna have a little.
He's not 21 yet.
Okay, he'll be 21 in, what time is it? In 6 hours. Mm-hmm. Okay, so no, we're not done. We're done spackling for the most part. We're still gonna have to spackle sooner or later, but for now, we're gonna take the scraper. So I pulled out 2 of my scrapers because sometimes the 3-layer cakes are like this thick for a single layer. So it'll be taller, so I'll need this one. But this one isn't as tall. They call them barrel cakes. This one isn't as tall. So we're gonna go ahead and use the regular size scraper. Now, the thing about scraping is that you do not push. The idea is to level out. You don't push, keep it at an angle, and after every go round, you're gonna clean your scraper off, okay? Okay. As you get better, you're gonna get like a time or 2 between scrapes, but you're gonna scrape your scraper on that cake multiple times until it's smooth. Okay. Now I know the top isn't done, right? We still see where the edges aren't even and so forth, and that's fine. What I'll do now is go ahead and take this cake and make sure I haven't forgotten anything. This is called an offset spatula. You have that bend so that you can have angles that you wouldn't typically get with a straight spatula. I love these things, such as right here. Now, typically I can use my scraper to do this, but it was just a small touch up. So, okay. So I'm going to stick this in the fridge for about 20 minutes. And what it does is that it firms up the top of the cake, and it makes it easier for you to use a knife to even out the edges of the cake. And you'll see what we're doing shortly after that. Come back in 20 minutes. Okay, so got my handy dandy knife here, right? I don't know if you can see, but I have a little paper towel down here that I'm wiping it on. It's not just on the bare counter. Anyway, so I just get a knife with a very thin, sharp edge. And what I'm going to do is go around. And what this does is help to keep sharp edges on your cake, right? I wish I had space in my freezer. Unfortunately, I don't, right? Because it works best when the icing is firm. So 20 minutes in the freezer would have been perfect for this. But I still do it because it's still going to work out for me, and I'll show you how. The beauty that comes from cake decorating is a lot of doing the same thing over and over and getting different response or a different outcome, you know? So we're going to smooth it out as much as possible. And then we're going to get our scraper and our spatula back in work. Okay. And it's always, icing always works best on a firm cake. So I don't know if you notice a difference in how it's laying out here, or even how the cake is responding with my pressure on there. And it's just a slight, this is not the last go round. It's just me adding what's necessary to even out the cake. And then I'll go over and smooth it all out. Okay. And I just go around the edge right here on top, and I grab any excess icing. And you're just going to work it out until everything works smoothly for you. Okay. And you can see the difference in the icing that I'm adding, which is room temperature, and the icing that's down here. As you can see, it's firming up. Okay. And I'll set this in the fridge overnight so that I can pull it out tomorrow and sing happy birthday to him. Okay. Now, typically, I would put this back in the fridge, let it sit, and then start to decorate. But I'm going to do a one-stop shop tonight. And basically, what we're going to do is I try to come up with an idea, because he was like, Mom, free flow it. But I don't want to give him a plain old cake like this. So I've decided to go through my cake stash, and I'm going to keep it simple, give him a little bit of gold gold splashes, and add some gold balls to it. And how I'm going to do that is I have some gold luster dust, and I put it in here, and I'm going to take maybe a quarter ounce of some rum. You can use rum, vodka, whatever, but make sure it's at least minimum 80 proof. And I'm going to pour it in there, mix it up with my brush. And what we're going to do is liquefy that powder, that luster dust. And this is what we're looking for. Okay, it's going to be thin, but if you leave this sitting without stirring it up or moving it around for about 5 or 10 minutes, it'll go back to a very pasty look. And that's not going to do anything for you unless you're trying to paint. But we're just trying to go with some splashes. Now, make sure that you clean this off right away. And it's easy to clean off with just some water. And okay. Gonna take some gold balls. And if you have an area on the cake, because we're not professionals, if you have an area on the cake that maybe you can't get right, maybe you just having an off day, these are great ways to hide it. So I like to put them on the least. I like to put them there the least pretty areas. But all my cakes are pretty. Don't get it twisted. Okay. One more to even out the top. Keep it very simple. He's a very simple person. One moment, let me get the happy birthday topper. And this birthday topper, for some reason, it spoke to me from before. This was always going to be on his cake because it just seemed like such a Michael moment. And there we go. We're going to take some napkin, tissue, whatever you want to call it. We all know he's bounty. The island just came out, didn't it? And we're going to clean off the side. Do not wet the paper, otherwise you're going to create smudges. Working with the luster dust, it can be messy, but the outcome is so good, so the pros outweigh the cons. And keep in mind, this is all you and your ancestors doing. So you want to put more gold splashes on it, by all means, go about doing that. He's just a more is less is more type of person. And even though he gave me carte blanche with the cake, I still wanted to reflect a little bit of, his personality. So he likes to keep things simple, and that's what we're going to do. Now, hopefully, my husband will let me come back when it's time to do his cake. We'll see how that one goes, okay?
Mom, the word.
We could do the pineapple upside down rum cake.
Oh.
Okay, so most of this is off. This is just my non-stick full grip padding here. But his cake is done. We'll keep it really simple. Now, I want to say thank you for letting me join you guys this time. Hopefully, I'll be back again and I'll bring another cake with me. Well, a cake to make with me next time. See you guys.
Thank you guys for sticking and staying with us. My wife, her first time, not first time on the video, but first time doing one by herself, and she did an exquisite job. Okay. She'll be back another time doing another cake or helping me out doing another recipe. Um, until then, you guys tell a friend to tell a friend, share, leave a comment, hit the like button, subscribe, and again, tell a friend to tell a friend. Love you. Till next time.
See you.
Bye.